Could you bring me a glass of water? The words left my mouth before I'd even settled into the armchair. 3 days in the hospital had left me parched in ways that went deeper than thirst. The surgical tape pulled at my chest with every breath, a constant reminder of what my heart had just endured. Jasmine froze in the kitchen doorway, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to something colder. Seriously, I just got home from the hospital. My voice sounded weaker than I intended. The drive had exhausted me more than I'd expected. And now even this simple conversation felt like climbing stairs. She crossed her arms. The gesture was sharp, deliberate. We're not your servants. The words hit harder than any physical blow. I stared at my daughter-in-law, searching for some trace of the sweet girl my son had brought home all those years ago. Nothing. Her face held the same expression she might use on a stranger asking for spare change. Baby, I spent 3 days in the hospital after heart surgery, I said. Each word came out carefully measured, as if speaking too quickly might tear something inside me. I'm asking for water. Marcus didn't even look up from the television. The remote control rested in his lap like a scepter of indifference. Some game show blared laugh tracks while my request hung unanswered in the air between us. The kitchen's right there, Jasmine gestured vaguely toward the sink, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. You've got legs. I gripped the armrests and pushed myself up. The surgical site screamed in protest, sending sharp ribbons of pain across my chest. My vision wavered for a moment, and I had to pause halfway between sitting and standing. The stitches felt like they might split apart, leaving me bleeding on the carpet of my own living room. Easy there, Mama. Jasmine's voice carried no warmth, just the kind of hollow concern people use when they don't want to appear completely heartless. Don't want you falling and making even more work for us. More work. As if caring for the woman who'd raised her husband was some unwelcome burden that had been thrust upon her. I thought about all the glasses of water I'd brought Marcus during childhood fevers. All the midnight comfort when nightmares had stolen his sleep. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life. My legs shook as I took the first step toward the kitchen. Each movement sent jolts through my torso, but I refused to sit back down. Not now. Not when the truth was spreading across my vision like spilled ink on white paper. This is ridiculous. Marcus finally spoke, his eyes still fixed on the screen, acting like she's dying or something. It was just a little heart procedure. Little procedure. I'd flatlined twice on the operating table, but apparently that qualified as little in their world. The surgeon had explained the complications, the close calls, the miracle that I was even walking around. None of that seemed to register with the two people who should have cared most. The kitchen felt miles away. Each step was a negotiation between my will and my body's limitations. Behind me, I could hear Jasmine's exasperated sigh. Next thing you know, she'll want us to cook her meals too, she muttered to Marcus. Don't give her ideas. Marcus's chuckle was dry, empty of any real humor. I reached the counter and gripped its edge. The cool surface steadying me. These weren't temporary frustrations. This was who they really were when they thought I was too weak to matter. The glass trembled in my hand as I filled it from the tap. Water had never tasted so bitter. When I turned around, they were both watching me with expressions that mixed impatience with barely concealed disgust. My own son looked at me like I was some inconvenient stranger who had wandered into his house uninvited. I'd built this house with my own hands, paid for their education, their wedding, their car payments. I'd given them everything I had, and they couldn't even bring me water after heart surgery. I walked back to my chair slowly, deliberately. I needed time to plan, to decide what kind of woman I was going to be for whatever years I had left. The afternoon sun slanted lower, casting long shadows across the room. Somewhere in those shadows, something was beginning to take shape, something that would make them understand exactly what they'd lost. I settled back into my chair and took another sip of water. It still tasted bitter, but now there was something else mixed in. Something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Walking to my bedroom felt like crossing a desert. Each step sent aftershocks through my chest, reminding me that my body was still healing, even if my illusions had just shattered completely. Family photos on the walls watched me, their faces suddenly seeming like strangers. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. The bedroom had always been my sanctuary, the place where my late husband Robert and I had shared our dreams. Now it felt like a refuge from my own family. The bed welcomed me like an old friend as I carefully lowered myself onto the mattress. My surgical sight protested, but the emotional wounds cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I stared at the ceiling, replaying those venomous words over and over. "We're not your servants." My own son had looked at me like I was a burden. The same son whose college tuition I had paid without question, whose wedding had cost me nearly $20,000, whose car payments I had covered when Jasmine lost her job last year. Memory has a way of flooding back when you need it most. 5 years ago, after Robert's funeral, I had sat in this very spot making one of the biggest decisions of my life. The insurance money had been substantial, enough to buy something smaller for myself and help my son start his married life properly. I remember driving to the real estate office, my hands shaking as I signed the deed transfer papers. This house had been my gift to Marcus and Jasmine. "Ma, this is too much," Marcus had whispered that day, tears streaming down his face. "We can't accept this." But I had insisted. "Family takes care of family," I told him. "Your father would have wanted you to have security." Jasmine had hugged me with what seemed like genuine gratitude, promising that I would always have a place here, that they would take care of me when I got older. Those promises felt like smoke now, dissipating in the harsh light of reality. I thought about the other gifts. When Jasmine's business venture failed and they needed $5,000 to avoid bankruptcy. When Marcus wanted to redecorate the kitchen and the estimate came to $8,000. When their car broke down and they needed something reliable right away. Every time I had said yes. Somewhere along the way, gratitude had transformed into expectation, and expectation had hardened into entitlement. They had stopped seeing me as a person who chose to be generous and started seeing me as an obligation-free source of money and support. The pattern was so clear now that I wondered how I had missed it for so long. My chest tightened. I reached for the nightstand where I kept my address book, my fingers moving with more purpose than they had felt in days. The business card was tucked inside. Patricia Morrison, attorney at law. I had used her for the house transfer and other legal matters over the years. A good woman who understood family dynamics. There were options I hadn't considered before, legal options that might help them understand the true value of what they had taken for granted. I stood up, the pain in my chest a dull, constant ache, and moved toward the window. The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the lawn. My lawn, the one I'd maintained for 20 years. Now it was just a patch of grass I looked out on from a room that was beginning to feel like a cage. Across the fence, my neighbor Denise Carter was wrestling with a new gas grill, trying to assemble it on her patio. I had known Denise for 3 years, ever since she'd moved in next door. A decent woman, I supposed, who kept her property neat and always gave a polite wave. But I'd always kept my distance. Just then, the back door slid open and Jasmine stepped out onto our patio. "Hey, Denise." "Fighting the good fight." Denise looked up, a grin spreading across her face. "You know it." These instructions looked like they were written by aliens. Marcus followed Jasmine out, carrying 2 beers. He tossed one to Denise over the fence. "That's why you don't read them. Just force the parts together until they stop moving." Denise laughed, a loud booming sound that always seemed a little too forced. She took a long drink from the beer. "A man after my own heart, Marcus." I watched them from behind the curtain, a knot tightening in my stomach. Denise was always like this with them, laughing at Marcus's crude jokes, complimenting Jasmine's garden, acting like they were the best of friends. She'd never been that friendly with me. It was always a quick nod. How's it going, Bernice?" Before she turned away to her, I was just the quiet old woman in the background. Jasmine leaned against the railing, her voice carrying clearly into my room. Mama's having one of her moods, since the surgery. Thinks she's the queen of the castle all of a sudden. Ah, give her a break, Denise said. But her tone was casual, dismissive. She's earned the right to be a little grumpy. She winked at Marcus. Just don't let her start telling you how to keep house. Marcus snorted. Too late for that. They stood there for another 20 minutes joking and drinking, a tight little circle of camaraderie that I was pointedly not a part of. They were a team, and I was the problem they had to manage. Denise's easy acceptance of their narrative, her casual siding with them, confirmed my sense of complete isolation. There was no one here to turn to, no one who saw what was really happening. I was on my own. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night of decision-making. I had called Patricia Morrison at 8 a.m. sharp, apologizing for the weekend disruption. Her voice was the same steady, professional tone I remembered. Of course, Mrs. Williams, she said. Given everything you've been through, I can be there by 10. Jasmine and Marcus had left for their weekly shopping routine around 9:30. Their departure filled with the casual chatter of a couple without a care in the world. Perfect timing. Patricia arrived precisely at 10, carrying the same worn leather briefcase she'd brought to every meeting over the past decade. Her firm handshake reminded me why I had chosen her for important matters. Please sit. I gestured toward the living room. She settled into the armchair across from mine, opening her briefcase with practiced efficiency. You mentioned family concerns on the phone. How can I help? I had rehearsed this moment. I need to review the legal standing of the house gift I made to my son 5 years ago, I said, my voice steady. Specifically, what options might exist if circumstances have changed significantly. Patricia's eyebrows lifted slightly, but her expression remained neutral. The property transferred to Marcus, correct? Let me pull those files. Documents rustled as she arranged papers across my coffee table. The deed transfer, gift documentation, tax forms, paperwork that had seemed so straightforward when love guided my decisions. The house is completely yours, Mrs. Williams. Her words stopped me mid-thought. Excuse me. Legally speaking, you retain full ownership rights. Patricia's finger traced across a specific paragraph in the deed document. The transfer was structured as a conditional gift with reversionary provisions. Standard practice for family property transfers. My heart rate increased. What does that mean exactly? It means that while Marcus holds the title, the property reverts to you automatically under certain specified conditions. She turned the document toward me, pointing to dense legal text I had signed but never fully understood. Material change in circumstances, failure to provide agreed-upon care or housing, or breach of family obligations. The words swam before my eyes as their implications crystallized. 5 years ago, Patricia had insisted on these protections, explaining them as standard safeguards that I had barely listened to. How quickly could such a reversion take effect? I asked. With proper documentation of changed circumstances, 30 days from filing notice. Patricia's tone remained matter-of-fact. You would need to demonstrate a material breach of the original gift conditions. I thought about the last 24 hours. Material breach seemed like an understatement. What kind of documentation would be required? Witness statements, evidence of changed circumstances, documentation of breached agreements, Patricia said, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Though I should mention family property disputes can have lasting consequences. Through the window I could see Mrs. Henderson from next door working in her garden. A normal Saturday morning while my world quietly shifted on its axis. The house felt different now knowing that it was still legally mine. That I wasn't as powerless as I had believed. I think, I said carefully, that I need to test whether the current situation might improve before making any irreversible decisions. Patricia nodded with the wisdom of someone who had guided other families through similar crossroads. That sounds prudent. Perhaps we should discuss what that test might look like. Evening brought the familiar sound of car doors slamming and shopping bags rustling. I positioned myself near the kitchen sink, timing my presence to appear natural when they entered. The afternoon had been spent processing Patricia's revelations, and now I felt ready to conduct my experiment. Jasmine pushed through the front door first, arms loaded with department store bags. Marcus followed, juggling car keys and takeout containers. "How was your day out?" I asked, keeping my voice genuinely interested. "Fine." Jasmine's response carried the same dismissive tone from yesterday. But now I heard it differently, not as a daughter-in-law's casual reply, but as evidence for a legal file. They moved through the living room, and I waited until they had settled their belongings before making my request. "Could you grab me a glass of water while you're up?" The question stopped Jasmine mid-motion. Her expression shifted from neutral to annoyed in the space of a heartbeat. "Can't you get it yourself?" Perfect. Almost exactly the same reaction as yesterday. "I'm still recovering from surgery," I pushed. "It would really help." Marcus looked up from his phone with visible irritation. "You walked to the kitchen just fine earlier. What's the big deal about walking a few more steps?" I maintained my calm tone, internally cataloging every cruel word for Patricia's documentation. "I was hoping you might show a little consideration for your mother-in-law, who just had heart surgery. Enough of this drama." Marcus's voice carried the edge of someone whose convenience had been threatened. "You're not an invalid. Stop acting like one." Jasmine nodded in agreement. "Seriously, Mama, you can't expect us to wait on you hand and foot just because you had a medical procedure." Medical procedure. As if my heart stopping twice on the operating table was comparable to getting a tooth cleaned. I stood slowly, making sure they could see the effort it took. The way my hand pressed against my chest where the surgical site still ached. "I see." My voice remained steady. "So asking for help from my family is unreasonable, when you can help yourself." "Yes." Jasmine's words came out sharp and final. "We're not your personal servants." There it was again. That phrase that had shattered my illusions now served as confirmation of what I already knew. They hadn't changed. If anything, they seemed more comfortable with their cruelty. I walked to the sink and filled my glass, each step deliberate and measured. Behind me, I could hear them resuming their normal routine. This time, I wasn't drinking with the bitter taste of broken expectations. This time, I was drinking with the satisfaction of a woman who had just gathered the evidence she needed. 20 minutes later, I stood in the living room doorway and made my decision. "I need you both to leave my house." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Jasmine's magazine slipped from her hands. Marcus's thumb froze over his phone screen. "What did you just say?" Jasmine's voice carried a dangerous edge I had never heard before. "This is my house," I said, my voice unwavering. "I want you to pack your things and find somewhere else to live." Each word came out steady and clear, backed by Patricia's morning revelation. Marcus stood up slowly. "You're kidding, right? This is our home." "No," I replied calmly. "This is my home. I gave it to you as a gift, but that gift came with conditions. You've broken those conditions." Jasmine jumped to her feet, her face flushed with anger and panic. "You can't just kick us out. We live here. We have rights." "Actually, you don't." The confidence in my voice surprised even me. "I spoke with my lawyer this morning. The deed transfer included reversionary clauses. When you fail to provide the care and respect that were part of our original agreement, ownership reverts back to me." The color drained from Jasmine's face. "No more free housing. No more financial safety net. You're bluffing." Marcus moved closer, his posture shifting into something more threatening. "You're just mad about yesterday, trying to scare us." "I'm completely serious. You have 30 days to find alternative arrangements." Marcus's laugh held no humor. 30 days? Where exactly do you think we're supposed to go? Do you have any idea how much rent costs these days? That's not my concern anymore. The surgical site in my chest had begun to ache from the tension. You made it clear yesterday and again today that caring for your recovering mother is too much trouble. So I'm removing that burden from your lives. Jasmine stepped between us, her voice rising with desperation. "Mama, please. We can work this out. Maybe we were having a bad day, but we can change. It's too late for that conversation. You're not going anywhere." Marcus's shout echoed off the walls as he moved to block the doorway. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here making threats like you own the place." "I do own the place." The statement hung in the air like a challenge none of us could take back. I watched as shock transformed into something much more dangerous in both their faces. Jasmine grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in harder than necessary. "You need to sit down and think about this rationally. You're not thinking clearly since your surgery." "My thinking is perfectly clear." I tried to step around her, but Marcus moved to block my path again. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice carried the unmistakable threat of physical confrontation. "To my bedroom to call my lawyer." "No, you're not." Marcus reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone before I could react. "You're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this like adults." My heart rate spiked, sending sharp reminders through my chest that my body wasn't ready for this kind of stress. "Give me my phone back when you start making sense." Jasmine positioned herself on my other side and I realized with growing alarm that they were coordinating their movements to control mine. "This is insane. You can't just..." "Can't what?" Marcus interrupted. "Can't protect our family from your crazy old woman threats? Can't make sure you don't do something you'll regret later?" They guided me toward the hallway, their grip firm but not quite painful. Yet, my surgical recovery had left me weaker than I wanted to admit, and fighting both of them simultaneously was beyond my current physical capabilities. "You're making a serious mistake," I warned as they steered me toward my bedroom. "The only mistake," Jasmine said, pushing open the bedroom door, "is letting you get this worked up over nothing." They guided me inside and Marcus pocketed my phone with a satisfied expression. "We'll talk about this tomorrow when you've calmed down," Jasmine announced. The bedroom door closed with a decisive click, followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock turning from the outside. 30 minutes of testing the door handle and examining the window had confirmed what I already suspected. I was thoroughly trapped. The lock held firm, and the window, while it opened, led to a 15-foot drop onto concrete. My surgical recovery made such an escape impossible. But the window offered something else entirely. Denise Carter was in her backyard, coiling up a garden hose as the evening light faded. The woman I'd watched laughing with my tormentors just yesterday. My only hope. Desperation makes for strange alliances. I pushed the window open wider, positioning myself where she could see me. "Denise, help me." Her head snapped up immediately, searching for the source of the voice. When her eyes found mine in the bedroom window, her expression shifted from confusion to concern in a heartbeat. "Bernice, what's wrong?" She dropped the hose and moved closer to the fence line between our properties. "I need you to call the police," I said, the words feeling strange coming out of my mouth. "My son and his wife have locked me in this room and taken my phone." Denise's face transformed into a mix of alarm and disbelief. "Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" "No ambulance. Just police. I'm recovering from heart surgery, and they're using that to control me physically." I kept my voice steady, knowing that panic would make her less likely to take effective action. She was already reaching for her cell phone. "Hold on, Bernice. I'm calling right now." Relief flooded through me. Help was actually coming. 911. "What's your emergency?" I could hear the dispatcher's voice clearly through her speaker. "I need police at..." Denise looked up at me questioningly. 83 Oakwood Avenue, I called down. "Tell them it's a family dispute involving unlawful confinement of an elderly woman." Denise repeated the information, adding details about my medical condition and the locked door. "Officers are being dispatched," the dispatcher finally announced. "Estimated arrival time is 8 to 10 minutes. They're coming, Bernice." Denise called up. "Do you want me to stay out here until they arrive?" "Yes, please." "And Denise, thank you. I know this is unusual. Don't worry about it." Her voice carried the steadiness of someone who had made her decision and would see it through. Through the bedroom door, I could hear muffled voices from the living room. They seemed calm, probably discussing their next move, confident that I was neutralized. "I can see a police car turning onto Oakwood," Denise announced. Footsteps rushed down the hallway. The lock clicked open, and Jasmine appeared with an expression of Oscar-worthy concern. "Mama, are you feeling all right? You seem agitated." Her voice carried the perfect blend of worry and confusion, as if she had found me in medical distress rather than behind a door she had locked herself. "The police are here," I said, stepping past her into the hallway. "Police? Why would police be here?" Marcus emerged from the living room, his face a masterpiece of bewildered concern. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Jasmine immediately took my arm, guiding me toward the front door with the gentle touch of a devoted daughter-in-law. "Let me get that," she said, opening the door to reveal two officers. "Good evening. I'm Officer Edwards. This is Officer Chloe. We received a call about a family dispute." "There must be some mistake," Jasmine said, her voice perfectly pitched with confusion. "We're just having a quiet evening at home. Mama just had heart surgery, so we're being very careful with her." I stepped forward. "Officers, I called you through my neighbor because my son and his wife locked me in my bedroom and confiscated my phone." Officer Chloe's eyes moved between us. "Ma'am, can you tell us exactly what happened tonight?" "They physically forced me into my bedroom and locked the door from the outside when I told them they needed to leave my house." Jasmine's hand flew to her chest in apparent shock. "Mama, that's not what happened at all. You were feeling dizzy and confused, so we helped you to your room to rest. The door wasn't locked. You were just having trouble with the handle." "The door was definitely locked," I insisted. Marcus moved closer, positioning himself supportively near Jasmine. "Mrs. Williams has been having some confusion since her surgery last week. The anesthesia can affect elderly patients for days afterward. We've been trying to help her, but she's been making accusations that don't make sense." "Ma'am, when did you have this surgery?" Officer Edwards asked. "Monday. But I'm not confused. They locked me in that room because I told them to leave my house." "Mama is just confused after the anesthesia," Jasmine said, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone dealing with a difficult medical situation. "She's been saying strange things all day. We love her and we're trying to take care of her, but it's been challenging." Officer Chloe looked around the living room, which appeared completely normal. "Mrs. Williams, do you feel safe in this house?" "Not when they lock me in rooms and take my phone." "We didn't take your phone, Mama." Jasmine reached into her pocket and produced my cell phone. "You left it on the kitchen counter. We were charging it for you." The smooth delivery of that lie stunned me. She handed the phone to Officer Edwards, who examined it briefly before returning it to me. "Mrs. Williams, have you been taking any pain medications since your surgery?" "Some, but I'm not confused or delusional." My voice carried increasing frustration as I realized how this was playing out. The officers exchanged a look that told me everything. They saw an elderly woman recovering from major surgery, possibly confused by medication, making accusations against family members who appeared concerned and caring. "Folks, it seems like there might be some misunderstanding here related to post-surgical recovery," Officer Edwards said diplomatically. "Mrs. Williams, if you feel unsafe or need help, you can always call us, but right now I don't see evidence of any crime being committed." After they left, the house fell into an ominous quiet. Jasmine and Marcus stood near the front door, their expressions transforming back to cold calculation. "That was a very stupid thing to do," Marcus said, his voice carrying a threat the officers had never heard. "They locked me in my bedroom again. But this time, they took everything." The 90 minutes I spent locked in that bedroom for the second time gave me time to think, and my thoughts led me to a decision my body would probably not like. The window beckoned me like a challenge I couldn't ignore. 15 feet to the ground. For a healthy person, it would be doable. For someone 5 days post-op from heart surgery, it could end in disaster. But remaining a prisoner in my own home was a worse fate than risking a fall. I opened the window as wide as possible, studying the drop. The landscape below offered some mercy, a flower bed with soft soil rather than concrete. From their room came the sounds of television and casual laughter. They were confident their performance for the police had solved the problem once and for all. That confidence would work to my advantage. Climbing out a window requires core strength, which heart surgery temporarily robs you of. Every movement sent sharp reminders through my chest. But the humiliation of being outsmarted burned hotter than any physical pain. I pushed one leg through the opening, then the other, until I sat on the windowsill like an elderly burglar planning the most pathetic robbery in the world. The ground seemed farther away from this angle. I wondered briefly if despair always felt like this, like standing on the edge of something with no good options. The fall shook every bone in my body when I finally let go. Pain shot through the surgical incision like electricity, and for a moment I lay motionless in the flower bed, waiting to see if anything important had torn. When no immediate disaster announced itself, I struggled to my feet and brushed the soil off my clothes. Moving around the perimeter of the house required stealth I hadn't needed since playing hide and seek as a child. The familiar landscape of my own property had turned into an obstacle course. At the front door, I crouched down carefully and lifted the doormat. The spare key was exactly where I had put it 3 years ago. My fingers trembled slightly as I inserted it into the lock. The door opened silently on hinges I had oiled myself last month. Inside, the house felt different. No longer a prison, but not quite a home either. A battlefield where the first skirmish had gone badly, but the war was far from over. Voices drifted from the living room, relaxed and casual. They were discussing plans for the weekend. I carefully made my way to my study, avoiding the creaky floorboards. My goal was not confrontation. Not yet. First, I needed access to my documents, my lawyer's contact information, and the legal weapons Patricia had confirmed I had. The hallway stretched out before me like a path to reclaiming everything they were trying to take away. The study was dark, smelling of old books and polish. I didn't dare turn on a light. The glow from the living room television provided just enough illumination to see the outlines of my desk and filing cabinet. I moved with singular purpose, my body protesting every step, but my will was made of iron. The file cabinet drawer slid open with a soft metallic whisper that sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. My fingers, still trembling slightly, found the tab labeled Property. I pulled out the thick manila folder. Inside lay the deed, Patricia's business card, and the detailed notes I had taken during our morning consultation. Everything I needed to burn their world to the ground. I held the folder to my chest, the sharp corners digging into my skin. This was my proof, my leverage, my freedom. With these papers, their lies about my confusion would mean nothing. The law was written in black and white, and these pages were my gospel. The sound of Jasmine's laugh drifted down the hall, sharp and carefree. It fueled the fire in my gut. They were sitting in my living room, watching my television, feeling safe and secure in my house while I was forced to sneak around like a thief to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I couldn't risk keeping the documents on me. If they found me, they would certainly take them. I needed to hide the folder somewhere they would never think to look. Somewhere I could retrieve it in the morning before I left for Patricia's office. My mind raced. Not in the house. They were getting paranoid now. They might search my room again. The garage. I slipped out of the study and crept down the hall, my back pressed against the wall. I could see them now, sprawled on the couch, illuminated by the flickering screen. They were completely oblivious. I reached the door to the garage, turned the knob with excruciating slowness, and slipped through, closing it silently behind me. The garage was cool and smelled of oil and sawdust. It was my space, filled with my tools, my projects, my life before it had been invaded. I found the perfect hiding spot, an old rusted paint can on a high shelf, tucked behind a stack of lumber. I slid the precious folder inside, replaced the lid, and pushed it back into the shadows. Safe. I was about to leave to make the long, painful walk to a motel for the night when I heard the garage door from the house open. I froze, diving behind my workbench just as the light flicked on. I'm telling you, Marcus, she was up to something. Jasmine's voice was sharp, laced with suspicion. The way she looked at us when the cops were here, she's not just confused. She's planning something. What could she possibly plan? Marcus sounded bored. She's a weak old woman. We have her phone. What's she going to do? Write them a strongly worded letter? She mentioned a lawyer, Jasmine insisted. What if she has papers, documents, something hidden in the house? My blood ran cold. So we search, Marcus said with a sigh. Let's just get it over with. Start with her room. I held my breath, hidden in the darkness as they went back into the house. For the next hour, I listened to them tear the place apart, drawers being pulled out, closets being emptied, papers being shuffled. They were methodical and they were thorough. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. They wouldn't think of the garage. They wouldn't. Then the garage door opened again. Nothing in the house, Jasmine announced, her voice tight with frustration. Check the garage. She spends enough time out here. Maybe she has a secret safe or something. Marcus groaned. This is ridiculous. We're acting as crazy as she is. But I could hear him start to move things around, knocking over tools, opening cabinets. My hiding spot was good, but it wouldn't stand up to a determined search. What's in this old thing? Marcus's voice was closer now. I peered through a gap in the workbench. He was standing on a stepladder, reaching for the high shelf. He was reaching for the paint can. Probably just dried up paint, Jasmine said from the doorway. He pulled it down, grunting with the effort, and pried off the lid. He reached inside and pulled out the manila folder. He stared at it for a moment, then a slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. Well, what do we have here? He handed it down to Jasmine. I watched as her eyes scanned the top page. I saw the moment she recognized the legal letterhead, the moment she understood exactly what she was holding. Her face, which had been tight with suspicion, now hardened into a mask of pure fury. I knew it, she hissed. The deed, the gift agreement. She was going to try and take the house back. Not anymore, Marcus said, hopping down from the ladder. He took the folder from her, walked over to the metal trash can where I kept oily rags, and pulled a lighter from his pocket. No, I whispered from the shadows. A useless, silent plea. He flicked the lighter. The flame caught the corner of the folder. He dropped it into the can. I watched, helpless, as 5 years of legal protection, my only tangible proof, my entire strategy curled into black ash and smoke. They stood there watching it burn, their faces illuminated by the destructive glow, looking like two demons celebrating a victory in hell. Let's see her prove anything now, Marcus said, kicking the side of the can. It's just the word of a confused old woman against ours. They laughed, turned off the light, and went back into the house, leaving me in the darkness with the smell of smoke and the bitter taste of defeat. The walk to Patricia's office the next morning felt like a funeral march. I hadn't slept. The image of the documents turning to ash was burned into my mind. I had escaped, yes, but I had lost the war. I arrived at her office looking like a ghost, the soil from the flower bed still faintly staining my clothes. Mrs. Williams, she said, ushering me in, her professional demeanor immediately shifting to one of grave concern. You look like you haven't slept much. Tell me what's happened since yesterday. I explained everything. The confrontation, the confinement, the police call that backfired so spectacularly, the desperate escape, and finally the destruction of the evidence. I told the story in a flat, defeated voice. When I finished, I stared at my hands, expecting her to tell me it was over, that without proof, there was nothing she could do. Patricia listened without interruption, her pen scratching furiously on a legal pad. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. So they physically locked you in your own bedroom, convinced responding officers you were confused, and then destroyed the legal documents you managed to recover. Her tone carried a professional outrage that was enormously validating. Yes. It's my word against theirs. And they're very, very good liars. This changes everything, Patricia said, a new energy in her voice. She pulled out the electronic file from our previous meeting. What we discussed yesterday as a possibility has now become a necessity. We're no longer talking about exploring options. We're talking about immediate action. But how? I asked. They burned everything. They burned paper, Bernice. They didn't burn the law. She reached for a thick legal reference book. Illinois state law is clear about gift revocation in cases of ingratitude. When recipients treat the donor with hostility, cruelty, or fail to fulfill implied conditions of care, the gift can be legally revoked. The words fell on my ears like music. And their actions, Patricia continued, her fingers flying across her keyboard, have moved this beyond a simple property dispute. Locking you in a room, taking your phone, destroying legal documents. This is coercion, elder abuse. Their claim to the police that you were confused can now be used against them as evidence of a pattern of manipulation. The irony was perfect. Their strategy had created evidence of the very behavior that justified gift revocation. So what do? We don't send a notice they can ignore for 30 days. We go on the offensive. We prepare a formal notice of gift revocation and an immediate eviction notice. Not 30 days. 72 hours. My head snapped up. 72 hours? Given their escalating behavior, we can argue they pose a threat to your safety and well-being. We will have it served by a professional process server this afternoon. They will not see it coming. And if they contest it, they will have to explain to a judge why they felt it necessary to lock a heart surgery patient in her room and burn her legal papers. How do you think that will look? Patricia's smile carried the confidence of someone who had already won the case. Monday morning brought clarity and official documents printed on Patricia Morrison's letterhead. I stood in the living room holding papers that would change everything, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what had always been mine. Jasmine was in the kitchen, moving with the casual confidence of someone who believed she had won. Marcus sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. Jasmine, Marcus, I need you both in here. My voice carried an authority they hadn't heard before. Not the pleading tone of a sick woman, but the firm command of someone holding all the cards. They exchanged glances as they moved into the living room, Jasmine's expression showing mild annoyance. I held up the documents, making sure they could see the official letterhead. These are eviction notices. You have 72 hours to remove yourselves and all your belongings from my property. The silence that followed was profound. Jasmine's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. Marcus's phone screen went dark. What are you talking about? Jasmine's voice carried the first hint of uncertainty I had heard from her since Friday. I'm talking about the legal reality you chose to ignore. I unfolded the first document and began reading. Notice of gift revocation. Pursuant to Illinois state property law, the undersigned property owner hereby revokes the gift deed on the grounds of material ingratitude and breach of implied conditions. Marcus stood up abruptly. You can't be serious. This house is ours. You burned the papers. You lived here at my discretion. A discretion you forfeited when you decided to treat me like a stranger in my own home. And you burned copies. My lawyer, it turns out, keeps the originals. I continued reading. Specific grounds include hostile treatment of the grantor, failure to provide reasonable care, deliberate confinement against the grantor's will, and destruction of legal property. Jasmine set down her coffee with shaking hands. Mama, this is crazy. You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go. That's not my concern anymore. You had the opportunity to treat your mother-in-law with basic decency. You chose cruelty and manipulation. But the police, Marcus began, his voice rising with desperation. The police report. My lawyer was very interested in that detail. It establishes a pattern of you using my medical condition to dismiss my rights. I let the legal consequences hang in the air. Failure to vacate within 72 hours will result in formal eviction proceedings and potential charges for unlawful confinement and destruction of property. Jasmine sank into a chair, her face pale. You actually went to a lawyer? I went to my lawyer, the same one who set up the gift deed 5 years ago. She was fascinated to learn how you've been treating the grantor of your free housing. Mama, please. Jasmine's voice cracked with the first genuine emotion I had heard from her. We can work this out. We can change. 72 hours, I repeated, folding the documents. Starting now. Behind me, I could hear Jasmine beginning to cry and Marcus's voice rising as he started making urgent phone calls. The sound of their panic was the sweetest music I had heard in years. But I wasn't finished with them yet. Tuesday afternoon found us sitting around the kitchen table like a family again, though the dynamic had shifted completely. Jasmine's eyes were red from crying, and Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. The eviction notice lay between us like a ticking bomb. Mama, please. Jasmine's voice was a desperate whisper. We know we made mistakes. We treated you badly, but we can change. We can be the family you deserve. I sat quietly, letting her words hang in the air. On the table in front of me lay a manila folder I had retrieved from my filing cabinet that morning. Documents they had never seen before. We were stressed about your surgery, Marcus added, leaning forward earnestly. We didn't handle it well, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. This is our home, our family. Your home, I repeated thoughtfully. Tell me, Marcus. Do you remember how I was able to buy this house? He wiped his eyes. You said you had saved money from your work. That's partially true, but where do you think the down payment came from? A house this size required substantial money up front. They exchanged glances. I don't know. Your savings. I opened the manila folder and spread several documents across the table. Official letterhead from Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Death certificates, beneficiary claim forms, all dated 5 years ago. Son, this house was bought with the insurance money from your father's death. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at the papers, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror that was painful to watch. The life insurance policy your father maintained for 20 years specifically to provide security for our family. I pointed to the beneficiary designation form. $350,000 paid out 6 months after his funeral. You never told me, he whispered, his hands trembling. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel guilty living in a house your father's death had purchased. I wanted you to see it as a gift from a loving mother, not something bought with tragedy. Why are you telling us this now? Jasmine asked. Because I want you to understand exactly what you've done. My voice remained calm, but each word carried the weight of 5 years of grief. This house, where you locked me in a bedroom, where you told the police I was mentally incompetent, where you refused me a glass of water after heart surgery, was purchased with money from your father's life insurance policy. Marcus made a sound that was part sob, part gasp. The papers slipped from his fingers. He died believing he was providing security for our family, I continued. He made me promise to use that money to keep our family together. He would be heartbroken to know that the house he thought would bring us together became the place where his son chose cruelty over compassion. I stood up, leaving the documents where they lay. The weight of moral reality settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about legal ownership anymore. This was about violating the sacred trust of a man who had died believing his sacrifice would protect the people he loved most. What can we do? Marcus whispered. How can we make this right? I looked at my broken, desperate son, who had finally understood the full scope of what he had lost. You have 44 hours, I said simply. Thursday afternoon brought the sound of cardboard boxes being taped shut and furniture being moved across hardwood floors. I sat in my recliner watching Jasmine and Marcus work with the quiet efficiency of people who had accepted their fate. The past 50 hours had transformed them. Gone was the arrogance, the entitlement, the casual cruelty. In its place was genuine remorse mixed with the hollow exhaustion of people who had lost everything. Marcus carried the last of their boxes through the living room, avoiding my eyes. Jasmine followed with a suitcase, her movements careful and deliberate. "That's everything from upstairs," she said quietly, setting the suitcase near the front door. The house keys lay on the coffee table between us, attached to the keychain she had bought 5 years ago. A little silver charm that read "Home, Sweet Home." "Ma," Jasmine said, approaching my chair. "I need you to know that I understand what I did." "I know you do," I replied. Marcus appeared in the doorway, car keys in his hand. "Everything's loaded. We're ready to go." Jasmine picked up the house keys from the coffee table. When she handed them to me, her fingers trembled slightly. "These belong to you," she whispered. The keys felt warm in my palm. They always did. She nodded, understanding the deeper truth in those words. This house had always been mine, legally, morally, and in every way that mattered. "I'm sorry about Dad," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm sorry we dishonored his memory in the house he provided for us. Your father would have wanted you to treat me with love and respect," I said calmly. "He would have been heartbroken to see what you chose instead." Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mrs. Williams, I take full responsibility for my part in this. I supported Jasmine's behavior and I participated in treating you badly. That was wrong." I shook his hand briefly. "Now you know what it means to lose a home." The words carried the weight of perfect justice. They walked toward the door, Jasmine pausing at the threshold to look back one final time. "Will you ever forgive us?" "That's not the question you should be asking," I replied. "The question is whether you'll remember this lesson well enough to treat the next person with the kindness you should have shown me." The door closed behind them with the soft click of finality. Through the window, I watched them load their remaining belongings into their car and drive away from the property that would never again be their home. Silence settled over the house like a comfortable blanket. For the first time in almost a week, I was alone in my own home, without the weight of family tension or the threat of being treated like an unwelcome stranger. I looked down at the keys in my hand, then at the insurance papers still scattered across the coffee table. Robert would have been proud to see justice finally served, to know that his sacrifice had ultimately protected the family he had loved, even if it had taken longer than anyone might have expected. Walking through the rooms of my house, truly my house again, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my surgery. Peace. Not the peace of revenge, but the deeper satisfaction of justice properly served and lessons properly learned. Outside, the Chicago afternoon continued its gentle progression toward evening, and I was home. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.